Welcome back to the Rakk Fuel Podcast. I'm Zach Haas of Creek Bottom Land Management, and alongside me is Tom Lesser of Rakk Fuel. Today, we're going to speak with Matt Yancy, owner, operator, outfitter, the man of all trades at Misty Morning Outfitters down in Alden, Kansas. How's it going today, Matt?
It's going. How are you guys?
Good. Doing good. Up in Minnesota today.
Sounds like a good place.
So we're going to kind of dive into it, Matt, and kind of start from the beginning. So with you obviously running Misty Morning Outfitters there, I guess how did you get your initial start actually in the outfitting business, guiding business?
Long story short, basically had a 9-to-5 and wasn't real pleased with where that was going. So went out on a limb, took a chance and took a guiding position, and it turned into what it is today. Pretty much.
Awesome. I guess, what was the biggest thing that really drew you to, guiding?
I mean, it's the typical verbiage of if you get up every day and you don't believe you're working, you don't work. So it's something I like to do. And there's a few times you get up and it's like, man, we got to go to work today. But most of the time, if you don't make it into a job, it's not a job. So you just have to really enjoy what I do, and I like seeing the results on the backside of it.
Matt, how long have you been guiding?
This year we'll be going into our 11th season. I guided some bow fishing trips and such before I moved to Kansas. So guiding total for deer and turkeys is about 9.5 years, and then the other 1.5 years was guiding bow fishing trips down in Alabama.
So you started off in Alabama. Is that where you're from? Is Alabama?
Yes, born and raised in Alabama. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I got to ask, I guess, coming from the South, why Kansas?
Well, why not? I mean, I tell everybody other than a bear and a moose, you can just about hunt anything in Kansas if you look hard enough. So, and I believe last year there's actually a couple of moose spotted up on the Nebraska border. So we ought not have too far to go before you can hunt a little bit of everything.
Awesome. I guess, in your opinion, Matt, with Kansas, what makes Kansas, and obviously outfitting Kansas, but what makes the deer hunting so unique down there compared to the rest of the Midwestern states?
The diversity in the terrain, number one. I mean, you can start on the east side of Kansas, and you would not know that you're not in, say, east of the Mississippi River. You have a lot of more diversity of trees and landscape there. But as you move farther west, you get more in the center of the state where we are. You get that mix. On the eastern side of our operating area, we have a lot of creek bottoms and timber and that kind of thing. And on the west side is starting to lose timber, and you're more into a prairie. And then obviously western Kansas is exactly what it is. It's mainly prairie and just wide open space. But you can it makes it into a hunt to what you want to experience versus what you may be stuck with in other states, as far as it's the same routine.
And I guess for you, Matt, what has, obviously you got to kill a lot of big deer. I've hunted down there personally. Seeing a lot of the big deer, have helped out with some of the land portions of it, the management portions. But I guess for you, what have you taken, I guess, from Kansas or your previous hunting experiences to make your outfitting business so successful?
Trying to put people in the same situations that I would put myself in is probably number one. Obviously everybody always asks, why do you make something you like to do a job? But it's not that. I mean, if I can put you or Tom or anybody for that matter, in the same spot I would want to be in to pull the trigger, then that's obviously the success side of it. I think that gets lost in a lot of misconstrued or lost in a lot of places now. You get guys that feel like they're a number, and I don't really see that. I want you to kill a deer just as much as you want to kill one, and I know that's a lot easier for people to to say than to hear than to actually do it. But it at some point bothers me a little bit when we don't get the job done.
So you've got guys coming from all over the place. Is there more people coming from a certain part of the country than others?
Definitely a major part of our hunters are from the Southeast. That may have a little bit to do with that's where I'm from and made a lot of connections in that part of the world before I moved here. But we're starting to get a lot more of that PA, New York, New Jersey, Maine. A lot of that, the East Coast, Northeast. We don't get a whole lot of guys, which is weird to me. We don't get a lot of guys west of here. Places you don't have whitetails. Not real sure why that is, but we don't. We've got a couple of guys from Nevada, a couple of guys from Utah and stuff that come, but not a lot of whitetail guys for us personally that are coming west of, Colorado west, all the way out to California. So real heavy southeastern United States is where most of our guys are coming from. But the Northeast is definitely starting to make a move on coming.
So I was born in Pennsylvania. That's where I started hunting. And a lot of the guys that I hunted with back then, they're shooting pretty much anything. Now it's changed recently. There's guys that are practicing quality deer management. But when you've got people coming from outside of the Midwest, whether it's the Southeast or Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, like you talked about, how do you talk those guys into waiting? Because sometimes they see that 125, 130-inch deer and they think it's a giant. How do you protect those really young deer that have a lot of potential?
Well, first, you talk to them very carefully. It's hard. We struggle with it every year, and it's hard for people to believe when I tell them this, but we've got certain systems in place to protect or keep people from shooting. I don't want to say too early. That's a bad phrase, but shooting the first deer they see that, they think knocks their socks off. And it's hard to talk to somebody that's never experienced a Midwestern hunt, especially like an Iowa or a Kansas hunt, that you can't really, for lack of a better term, talk off the edge. They're so used, and it's a generational thing. They're so used, they've grown up shooting the first deer they see, or if I don't shoot this deer, somebody else is going to shoot it when it crosses the property line, kind of thing. We do have places like that here. I have properties that I can't manage. But for the most part, even the residents here aren't going to shoot something that's just, hey, I'm going to shoot a deer to shoot a deer. But kind of what we've done, we have 130-inch minimum on all of our farms. And what I've been trying to do the last couple of years is, as we pick up new farms or new leases, we take one of our older leases that we've been managing for a couple of years and we bump those up to 150-inch minimum. So when I tell folks that I've only hunted, say I'm going to pick on the eastern and southeastern United States, when they've only hunted there in that part of the world their entire lives, it's hard to fathom that, hey, I can't shoot anything less than 150 or even 130-inch deer. So I set them down, and there's a couple of things, it's a law of averages, if you want to call it that they're not going to make a mistake. I've had very few people that, if they actually listen to what we tell them and take it to heart, is they very rarely shoot deer that are too small. Not to say that they're not in the tree stand having to come to Jesus with themselves, but for the most part, I would say less than 5 in 10 years have legitimately shot one that was too small that they thought was the right size. Most of the stuff you get that are shot that are too small for our rules are just folks that blatantly do it just to do it.
Now, is that happening a lot the last couple of days, just so they can kill a deer because they paid for an outfitted hunt?
we had a few years ago, we had one particular rifle season that we had 3 or 4 deer that was the case. In my opinion, that was the case. They were shot on the last day after they were passed on the first day just to shoot a deer. That's honestly what my opinion of it is. May not be, but from that day on, I kind of told myself we need to get a grasp on this. And so I don't want to talk about it as being a fine or a penalty. It's just a measure to stop people and make them think of what they're doing. But our underscore policy now starts at $1,000 on the first day and increases $500 every day after that. So if you shoot a deer on the last day, it's on a 6-day hunt. I mean, you can do the math. It's going to be pretty expensive.
Right.
And you're probably still not avoiding. Some people are going, all right, I'm going to pay it. Which I guess in that case, they're out the money.
We've had 2 guys that have tested the water on that theory and didn't like the result out of the end of it, I guess. But they both, well, I'll say both. One of those guys still hunts here today, and the other gentleman, he does not. But when first year guys, when they come in, they have it's almost like they can't believe that the hunting is so good. Generally, our hunters, Zach, you can attest to this, you're going to see more bucks in a 5-day period than you'll ever see does on our property, which obviously you can gather from that our buck to doe ratio is pretty even, if not more bucks than does, which in turn makes the rut that much more intense. But when guys coming for the first time see it, they hear it from their buddies, they hear it from guys that have been here, they hear it from us, but until they see it, they can't grasp at what we're telling them until they physically see it. So if you can get those guys to just wait a day or two before they pull the trigger and let them see it, they'll be believers in it.
Yeah, and I'll say you do a good job too. Like obviously being there in camp, that first night, it's kind of a cool situation. Everyone sits down at the table doing paperwork, and you go, and also you can see behind Matt right now, he has all his sheds, but he also has skull mounts and stuff like that and bucks everywhere, but kind of goes through a kind of a teaching in a way, saying, all right, what do you guys think this is? And, the lack, I guess, of knowledge of the score is definitely seen, but they can get their eyes on it, and there too, like Matt will show you the trail cam pictures, which I know you're part of your day job, which should be a full-time job, is just checking your tactic cams. But, he's able to show you the bucks around that area, and all right, this 8-pointer ain't going to make it because small brows or short twos. He does a great job of that, educating, which I've seen that firsthand.
So not to interrupt, but just can you see that?
Maybe what you can do is email that picture.
That's live action, like 2 minutes ago. But no, and Zach mentioned 8-point. For our particular area, anyway, in most places in the United States, if you're trying to shoot 130 or above deer, if you'll just leave those 8 points alone, generally you'll be fine. For our particular area, there's certain things I tell guys to look for that. If they'll leave those 8 points along and, those ears wide 10 points with, 6 and 7 inch or taller tines, you're going to be, just naturally, you're going to be in that 130 inch range. I get a lot of questions actually why we don't manage more on age than rack size. I think both of you, if the question was turned around, there's too much argument in people's opinions on deer's age.
Right.
It's just too far out in the weeds to really go on a commercial basis. But I mean, I can have certain deer that, 2 or 3 years old, that, and I see them and I watch them, I guess you could say, grow up, but, there's certain things we can do to protect them, and just our minimum and our feed process alone usually does that. But you'll get a couple of those deer that are young, 2, 3, that are 140, 145, that you physically have to put a guy in there that's got the restraint not to do it. They do make the minimum,
Yeah.
but it's one of those special deer that'll be special, in a couple of years. So.
Yeah, like I know, like one of your farms, for instance, that like I personally hunted and like Jay Paul's hunted. I remember sitting there, and my first time hunting the rut down in Kansas with Matt I was sitting there, and first morning I had a 3-year-old 12-point come out. Probably was in mid-40s. Me, just in that nature, I was like, all right, he ain't old, but he's gonna be a mega next one.
Right.
Later that hunt, I shot a mature 8-point that scored less, but for me it was that age thing. But yeah, like Matt said, not everyone's gonna be able to go, oh, he's a 3-year-old, let's let him walk. I mean, that's a big deer for a lot of the clientele.
I don't know for sure, but I think Jay Paul's dad may have killed that deer 2 years later at 190. That deer he killed was a typical 12 off of that farm. So, I mean, yeah, it's, probably the other biggest thing that I see with protecting deer or that for that matter is, you can't take a southeastern, South Georgia, South Alabama, Florida even. You can't take their management mentality and apply it to the Midwest. And you can't take our mentality and apply it there. And, one thing that opens a lot of people's eyes on that here is just the bone structure of the deer. They're just generally bigger. And until you put your hands on one or you pick up a skull and see that the distance between the pedicles on one of our deer is, an inch wider, just the skull's an inch wider, kind of puts it into perspective of, when you're trying to age deer by looking at them in the South versus in the Midwest, it's not totally different, but there are certain aspects of it that you can't use. So,
yeah.
How many acres are you guys running?
So we just opened a second lodge, and between both lodges right now, we're running about 18,000 acres.
Just a few acres.
Right. And how many hunters a year do you guys have come through?
Generally, we try to. So what we're having to do, and I think we'll get to this later on, but we've started shooting for a percentage over what we want just because of the draw. Obviously, we're not hitting 100% draw, but we're trying to land somewhere between both lodges combined, somewhere around that 50-55 mark.
Okay. So not very many hunters for that one. I mean,
no,
crazy.
I mean, and we don't have, there's certain farms, and can't recall off the top of my head if Zach's hunted this particular farm, but we've got one farm it's 320 acres, and it's got about a 3/4 of an acre of huntable area. So it's really misleading as far as acres versus. That's the other thing we fight with a lot of guys is in our area is a lot of wide open ground. So, that 18,000 acres, we're actually probably doing that more like on about 7, 8. You get a lot of a lot of open, unhuntable ground.
So I guess to touch on what we just mentioned, that lottery system is getting tougher to draw. How much has that affected you, and how long has it taken guys to draw now?
This particular year was weird. I will say we had guys that had 2 points that didn't draw a tag, and we had guys that had never applied before that applied that drew a tag. So I'm not real sure. Without pointing fingers or making assumptions, I'm not real sure how that works.
Right.
It was all over the board. I mean, guys that like I said had 1 or 2 points. The 2-point guys really confused me. The 1-point guys, I can see it. We're kind of on the edge with our system of we're not quite to the point of where it takes 2 points to draw, but we're just kind of hovering on that line, and it's making it really tough for us because if we were on the I need points to draw side, I could tell you guys hey, you need at least 2 points to draw for sure. 1 will get you there, but 2 is a for sure. Well, obviously we had those guys this year that I told that didn't draw their tag, and then guys, like I said, that had never applied before got it. So I wish we could get on one side of that line or the other. I would like to go back in reverse to the days of where we were 100% or even have leftover tags, but I think those days are gone. And I don't know. The last couple of years we've been right on that verge of needing points, but you don't need them. So the Iowa situation, 3 to 5 years to draw, I can see us being there very easily. It all kind of, in my opinion, depends on what the state does with the tags. Either there's talks out there to raise or lower the number of tags, and there's talks out there to raise the fee for the tag. To basically, the demand is higher than the quantity, so they got to price their way out of it somehow. Whether it's lower the tags, keep the fee the same, lower the tags, raise it. They don't really know where they want to be with that yet. So,
and I think like Tom and I can even talk we both hunt Iowa a lot, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but it's like if you really want to hunt a state, you're going to pay the fee.
Right.
So in a way, it's like it'd be nice just to raise a fee if you really want to hunt it, so then you can kind of bank on it too, that people can get the tag, get in there. Because like for me, like Iowa right now, we have to wait 5 years, 6 years.
Not me.
And it's one of those things that, all right, so $2 maybe every decade. That's too much.
As much as I want to bow hunt Iowa, I'm not waiting 5 years. I'm going to shotgun or muzzleload it and hunt every 2 years. But
that's a long time to wait.
It's a long time. I don't even want to wait 2 years. I want to go every year. But I don't want to buy that governor's tag.
And, I don't know either. Kansas, our tags are general tags. So you specify, gumbo or muzzleloader when you apply for that. But so as of right now, they're all on the same, they're on the same level. So until we get some sort of stricter system of, an archery tag takes longer, like, if it's set up like on the Iowa system. But as of right now, it's kind of this year for sure, the last 2 years have been really kind of all over the board as far as I couldn't honestly tell you if you had points that you're going to draw. But it's not going to, moving forward, I don't think it's a bad idea to buy a point. Zach and Seth usually are every other year. So, you get on a system to where you can buy a point and then apply the next year.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys don't. This year I had a lot of guys that have been coming since I've been here, 10 years. They've been coming every year, and I had entire groups this year that were 10-year groups that haven't got a tag. So, I would rather have those guys in camp because they're used to the system. Not saying they're any better or any worse, but they're used to what we do and they understand it. It makes it easier on our side of the fence to, hey, we don't have to worry about them shooting a 120-inch deer, on Zach will know this. We had a deer a couple years ago that we thought was going to be in that 230 to 250 mark, and we throw a guy in there and he shoots a 125-inch 8-point. It's tough, I don't really know what you can say or do other than just stand there and dumbfounded, but it's part of it. But those guys that have been in camp know the system. Obviously, they know it a little better, and the guys coming in, like I said, 99% of them do great, and every now and again you find that one that you just can't really drive in the right direction, I guess.
Right.
And I guess on that note, Matt, obviously you have the guys that are tried and true. They know processes, how to find the stands, what they're looking for. What do you do as the owner outfitter to prepare those new people in camp that have never been there before?
The biggest thing I tell them, and that a lot of they're calling in the off season and just touching base and sending an email back and forth or whatever, is just come into camp. The first most important thing, in my opinion, is come into camp with a realistic expectation. It's very easy in today's world with social media and TV to come in and expect that a 185 is going to walk by you day one. It just is what it is. And the most of them that have a very real expectation of what's about to happen and understand that still hunting, usually do great. The ones that I got a lot of guys that come in, some can do it, some can't. They're like, I'm not picking my bow or my gun up for anything less than 160. That's fine, but you have to understand you've got to sit there to a 160 and know what that looks like comes by. So that's the biggest, I guess, fight people have is with themselves of knowing, number one, what they're actually looking at, and two, having that expectation of what to expect.
So obviously with Kansas too, it's wind down there is different than anywhere else. I mean, a calm wind is 25 miles per hour wind. So these deer are used to it. So a lot of people aren't used to that kind of hunting style. I guess if you could tell people, what to bring, outside obviously a positive attitude, but is there any tools, tricks and things they should be bringing to camp to increase their odds of being successful?
I mean, I don't think there's any one special item that makes a huge difference. I mean, everybody, obviously scent control's big nowadays. Everybody has their own ideas and thoughts behind that. Me personally, I'll never go back to a tree, after moving here and seeing, I'll never go back to a tree without an ozonics. Until you see one work. I mean, it's not a fail-safe system by no means, but until you see one work, it does give you a greater margin of error if you do get a wind shift or, you got something that's borderline. Thing about here is like you mentioned with the wind, it's constant. And when the wind quits blowing, you've heard me tell people, those deer, they freak out. They're jumpy, they're edgy, they're what I would consider southern deer at that point. They look up in trees, do all the things that our deer don't typically do. So being prepared for the wind is probably more important, in my opinion, than being prepared for the cold. The temperature is the temperature, no matter if you're New Jersey, Texas to California. But our wind we want that wind to be that 15 to 20 mile an hour range most of the time. The good thing about that wind being that high is your scent cone is very small downwind. So at a 20 or 25 mile an hour wind, your scent may not hit the ground for 75 or 100 yards. Mm-hmm. So 50 yards, just depends on the terrain and, exactly how, if it's a gusting wind or a steady wind or whatever. But being prepared for that is probably number one. Two is going to be shoot whatever you're confident in shooting. We could go into the broadhead arrow discussion, but I don't know if we have enough time for all that. But if you're confident in it and you kill deer at home with it, 9 times out of 10, it's going to work here. A whitetail's a whitetail. And put that shot where it's supposed to be, and it'll be there.
So I guess in camp, Matt, for you, what general rules, I guess, do you have? Like, I know you have some stuff there, after the shot, do, A, B, and C. Don't do these items. Don't bring this stuff. I guess, what general rules do you usually provide for your clients?
I'm one of those guys, the simpler the better, but it's sad to say you got to have rules in place. But so like typically on say an afternoon hunt, if we shoot a deer, a guy shoots a deer, most of the time it's kind of a built-in fail-safe for us. From hunting here, we're spread out over a very large area. We can get in the truck and from either lodge drive an hour and 10 minutes one way. So by the time we get 5 or 6 guys out there, depending on where we're at, kind of a built-in fail-safe for us. If we shoot a deer in the afternoon, we don't immediately come to you and track it unless it's like way early in the afternoon. If it's an hour, 30 minutes before dark, which is more typical to, prone time to shoot the deer, we're going to get you, come back to the lodge kind of thing. So we just tell guys, don't get in a big hurry to let us do our job that you hired us to do at that point. We'll find the deer. I personally think that's probably the biggest issue of people not finding deer or pushing deer to the point they don't find them, is being real with themselves, number one, of where their shot placement really was. You see the everybody shoots a deer, they're like, oh, I smoked him. Well, I guess it depends on your definition of being smoked. But I mean, we've seen guys that we've had guys shoot deer and we've not found the deer and kill the deer 3 weeks later or a month later, and the shot difference in the two arrows that shot the deer is 3 inches, a 3-inch difference in impact, and the deer be dead in 20 yards. So it's both guys claim they smoked the deer. One actually did, one didn't. So it's those things are I think will be better as far as your rules, I guess, if you just tell me the truth at what happened, and most of the time we'll find your deer. I mean, as far as in camp rules, that's really about it. I mean, try to keep it as simple as we can, but also be as successful as we can too.
So talking about going and finding the deer, one of my favorite things is what you guys do with social media, where you light the campfire, and then when you go into it's a live look when you go in to find those deer. How long have you been doing it, and how'd you come up with that idea? Because I think it's brilliant.
So the lighting the fire deal was in place well before I got here. I think we're going to figure out something. We're going to have to realign something here with that, because we're going to burn down half of Kansas in firewood, or but now people that know, I mean, it's one of those things, if you know what that means, and usually that means obviously somebody has shot something. But it was really initially done to where, and it still happens, but the fire gets lit and my phone melts. And sometimes it's to the point of I just have to turn it off and not respond to anybody. But what'd you get? Where'd you kill it at? All that kind of stuff. But the thought of doing the live recoveries, it's kind of a double-edged sword for me. Is if you get in there and you get on a track that gets hard halfway through, you got blood, and then all of a sudden it runs out. It's like, now we're just sitting here with her, a thumb in her hand, and like, what do we do? Like, it's honestly boring at that point. But the thought process behind it is to get maybe those people that are looking to come book a hunt and come and hunt here, or maybe, I've had guys that are injured or in the hospital or whatever that can't hunt that year or whatever, that it kind of involves them. It gets them involved with it. You see the initial react. You see 100% raw emotion of the recovery of what it means to the person that shot it. And, we get a lot of people that ask us if we stage it or whatever. And I try to do it over the shoulder. Obviously sometimes I can't control what they say or do, but, try to bring it as real as we can bring it. I think that's part of what's missing out of a lot of the social media and TV part of it, is it's always hyped up and people get up on it and they try to, not necessarily, I should rephrase that. You see a lot of social media and TV where they come up on a deer and they start justifying why that deer. You shot it for a reason, and that's all, be happy or whatever. We get guys that will tackle you when they find deer, and you get guys that are like, oh, that's cool, let's put him in the truck and go back to camp. You get from A to Z in emotion, but that's kind of the reason behind it, was to get people involved that necessarily may not be able to be involved, or wife, kids, sons, daughters, whoever that are at home and can actually watch it and be there. So
Yeah, and that's one thing like I love about being on a camp. Like it's honestly you feel like family. You get down there. For one, bring your stretchy pants because Leah makes really good food. But with that said, I mean you're part of the camp. You're on the fire. Beautiful lodge, great amenities. I mean it's one of those things you feel at home for that week. You know, you don't feel like Matt said, you're not a number by any means. I mean, like me personally, watch his two boys grow up and you know them all very well. And you start even knowing the people in camp too that come by. And like Matt said, he has a lot of repeat people. And, but yeah, you kind of get excited, like not about the hunt. It's like, all right, I have a week in Kansas camp, you know? But no, like the live video and all that stuff too, you're sitting in camp watching them and like, all right, they found it. You know, and then you know that's coming back to camp and that's party.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, there's a lot of that live feed. Yeah, a lot of especially muzzleloader because we're only hunting afternoons. So you know the guys have dove hunted in the morning together. You know everybody's kind of interacted together all day long. Well, the guys sitting at camp, you know they found it, and you know we've you know not getting dark till 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So we're midnight usually minimum before we're tracking deer anyway. But there's been plenty of times at 2 or 3 in the morning when we've rolled back in with deer that the entire camp's still up, fire lit, you know, party hardy, you know, and just to celebrate with the guy that brought the deer back. So,
yeah,
you know, probably a good thing we don't hunt mornings that time of the year, but.
So kind of switch gears here, Matt, as we kind of get towards the tail end of this. So obviously I know there's some changes going on with the Game Commission and all that. I guess, you know, what is Misty Morning Outfitters kind of doing to prepare for possible changes coming down the road, possibly?
Well, that's kind of a work in process. Obviously, if the Game Commission here in Kansas does the baiting and supplemental feeding ban, water's obviously going to be for sure. It's still early in the stages of them discussing this, but it was discussed, it was brought up of how, I guess for lack of a better term, how many acres or how big of an area is defined as a food plot. So my opinion, obviously, if they go down that road or they want to get out in those weeds, that I mean, it doesn't matter. In my opinion, if it's a 200-acre soybean field or a half-acre soybean field, it's the same. Yeah, I guess the area is spread out, but it's the same. Not necessarily planting a 200-acre field for deer to come to. Obviously, it's an agricultural field, but it's serving the same purpose at a certain extent. I don't know exactly what they're going to decide to do in that regard, but it's still too early to tell. But if we were to see a baiting ban or a feeding ban, if that's year-round, which that's what they're pushing to do, I mean, that's none at all. As far as I know, that's no mineral, no supplement during the summer, and no baiting during the deer season. Of, you know, our food plots and water systems are going to be huge.
Absolutely.
You know, it's going to be tough, you know, with our part of the world and our experience with rain, whether it is or it's not. But definitely something we're looking at trying to put our finger on and get. You know, if they come down with that decision of we got to step up in that department. So, you know, at that point, every property would receive multiple water, you know, wildlife ponds, or we've even discussed drilling some wells if possible. You know, that's like I said, everything's on the table. We just kind of got to wait and see what they decide. And, you know, obviously it's being CWD driven. It's what they're portraying as the deal. And in the same sentence, they'll also tell you that it's like 0.2% of deer that they test are positive. So I'm not real sure. I mean, not to bring up politics, but it all kind of goes back to the COVID deal of let's not make a big deal out of something that's not. So
that's about the best way to compare it. To me, it's the same. I think it's the same thing. That CWD and COVID, they're just going to use that to charge more or do whatever they want.
In my opinion of it, if CWD has obviously always been around. It's not something that just all of a sudden decided to show up one day. And I really think the driven factor of why CWD is so prevalent nationwide now is, in my honest opinion, social media and TV. If, for lack of a better term, if people would just shut up talking about it, understand that it's an issue and it is there, and it obviously it does happen and it exists. But if it just went away from the mainstream, I don't think you have as much going on with it at all. I really don't. The last meeting that I went to, there was a gentleman that called in from like New York or something that had killed a deer, and he voluntarily had it tested. Well, A, where did you have it tested? And B, if they find something in there, I mean, are we just labeling it? Are we just putting a label on it because it's the easiest diagnosis, or is it really CWD? Mm-hmm. But you get folks, as bad as it is to say, you're going to have folks that are hunting or started hunting just because of what they watched or saw on TV or social media that are going to play into the whole craze, I guess, if it's what you want to call it, of, I got to see if my deer tested positive or whatever. It's something that's always been around.
Yeah, I guess keeping on that note, Matt, obviously, let's say, those rules, obviously it's in the early stages of whether it'll go through or not. But like for you, how are you maybe changing or looking at properties different just in case maybe, are you looking for more properties that have like river basins or creek bottoms or maybe some contour or maybe more wooded areas? I guess, do you foresee yourself changing that way as far as finding different, entities on a property or different details than you would have previously?
Honestly, in our part of the world, the river and creek bottom land is usually your most fertile, obviously. And that's the thing, like our creeks and rivers, you've seen them. We don't have a lot of timber around those. There's places that have pockets. It may be a 5-acre pocket or a 10-acre pocket or something like that. Or, for instance, here just north of town of, one of the properties we've worked on a long time of, they've got the largest pocket of timber on that creek for like 20 miles, which is like 34 acres on the neighbor. We've got the food, they've got the timber kind of thing. But the way most of it lays in this part of the world on those rivers and creeks is they're just natural funnels anyway. They're going to be anywhere from 10 to most of them 40 or 50 yards wide of timber on each side of that creek. So it's not terribly hard to hunt if they were to invoke a baiting ban. The problem, I think, where we're going to see the biggest problem with that is going to be like your more western stuff for us of, northern and western stuff where you don't have a lot of trees.
Yep.
But your food plots should at that point, because that's usually in agricultural ground. So I don't necessarily think what we're looking at in a property is going to change. The problem is on those places where there's not natural funnels and from experience, deer here, there's deer trails, but they don't necessarily walk them every day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places they just roam. They'll get up and just walk out of a group of trees. But I think that's the biggie if they were to, other than year-round herd nutrition and trying to help the animals. But if they done that, as far as the properties and how we hunt them is going to get a little tougher with a bow because you can't pinpoint exactly where they're going to be. Are they exactly going to be on that trail or whatever? You probably better be prepared to shoot 50 or 60 yards, instead of getting them into that, 25 to 20 to 30 yard wheelhouse, So
yep.
I don't think it's going to change how we look at it. I don't I don't think it will very much, so.
Yeah, and I guess, you're kind of going on that note, obviously, too, with your clientele coming in, we'll just switch gears a little bit as we end up here, Matt. But, I guess as people get looking into Kansas, and I know you're obviously always looking for properties and you're looking how to switch things up. And obviously the deer you have, there's some craziness down there. Personally, I've seen probably 2 of the top 5 biggest deer I've ever seen in my life in Kansas. And I luckily was able to hit a sapling on the last one, which Matt knows. But with that said, I guess what's the best way, for a future client wanting to get in touch with you, Matt, to start the process of figuring out how to get their points, how to set up hunts with you, and to kind of get their realistic expectations to get over to Misty River Outfitters?
Yeah, we're available on social media, Instagram, Facebook. We've got I don't really do a whole lot of Twitter, but we're there. Really, any of those avenues on the social media side, our email, website. Most of the time, people just go through our website and they'll, send me an email or whatever, and we'll start the process. But really, just to get in touch with us and see kind of what a guy or a gal would be looking to put together. And the big thing is starting the process. If we're getting into this deal of having to have a point, well, you're at least 2 years out, to be safe, as far as, saying that, hey, your probability of having that tag's pretty high. You're 2 years out. You can try it the first year, but we just need to plan it. And the reason for us opening that our Alpha 7 Lodge in Russell is because we were staying full here, and we had an avenue with my business partner to open up he's a firearms instructor, so we had the avenue to combine those worlds. And so, spring, summer, early fall, they're doing the firearm stuff, and then we're running deer hunts out of there in the fall. But it was also an avenue not to necessarily say no, but to have a spot. Is we got into a situation, guys were trying to rebook, and the new guys and gals coming in figured out they had to jump over the returning clients to be able to fight for a spot.
Yep.
So it opened up an avenue to where we constantly all have somewhere, if you want to hunt the Alden Lodge and we're, a year or 2 out, then you may have to go hunt a year at Alpha Lodge before you can get in, or vice versa. If you want to hunt there, whatever the case may be. But that's the biggie, is planning. A lot of people for Kansas and Iowa especially, they don't understand that it starts at least a year and a half out to plan it.
Yeah, and then obviously you're pretty active on Facebook and stuff that way, I know. So a lot of people, go make sure to check out Misty River Outfitters on Facebook, because he's doing, like Tom asked about, the live feeds. They'll have them this fall, which is always fun to watch. Hopefully you see me on there. Fingers crossed. We'll see if the guy on the other side of the screen sets me up well. No, just kidding. But maybe on a nice gar hole, huh, man? No, but with that said, watch there. Matt puts a lot of information, when to apply, how the processes are working, if there's updates with the whole game commission. Matt's very active with the boards and stuff that way down there, whether it be for deer or turkeys, quail, name it. But obviously, whether you want to hunt big deer, real turkeys, or if you want to go to Alpha 7 and shoot some robots, the opportunities are there.
Yeah, definitely. And something, we just had our grand opening on the gun store there at Alpha. I think it's going to be a new way for us to settle camp disputes, Zach. We've got a 2,500 square foot shoot house up there with a simunition range, so we might have to start dueling like they did in the old days.
Well, just don't tell Seth about it, so I have the one up on him.
I just have one thing left, since I didn't draw.
Yeah?
Just save one big buck for me, Matt.
I've got plenty of that rope out here that everybody wants me to tie one up, so we'll get him
good deal, Matt. Well, thanks Thanks for coming on and everything that way. Obviously, once again, check out mistymorningoutfitters.com. And like I said, Facebook, I know that's where Matt's the most active. But yeah, follow along. Thanks for coming on again, Matt. But if there's anything else, shoot us a message and we can, if anything about Kansas, we can get you over to Matt, hook you guys up, figure out the application process, getting points, all that. And then from there, Matt can work his magic and get you on one of these giant Kansas bucks.
I appreciate you guys having me out.
All right. Thank you much, Matt. Take care.
Thanks, buddy.